Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description, to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 6, Episode 3 of FX's Snowfall, entitled Door of No Return. This episode title appears to be named after what looked to be quite literally a door of no return that we see an absolutely gorgeous shot of Leon and Wanda standing in toward the, I'd say early, the end of the first act of this episode. What a beautiful shot this is. And this is coming on the heels of Leon and Wanda essentially learning about the history of what went down in Ghana, particularly things that revolved around black people betraying their own people, which was, of course, going to resonate with Leon, who we already knew coming into this season was feeling a lot of guilt about everything, actually, about everything. He's, it culminated with killing the kid, but Leon had regrets even leading up to that point, and he regrets a lot of the stuff that he did. And this episode, this was an interesting episode because not a lot happened in this episode, and it's because this episode had one purpose and one purpose only, which was to reintegrate Leon into the storyline and essentially let us know the stakes for him. And that's really everything you see like that involves Leon is moving toward that goal. Every scene with Leon is either meant to, we're going to do this in two ways, to either inform us on the internal struggle that he's coping with regarding, everything he did in his past in LA, everything he's dealing with guilt over, or it's meant to inform us of how everyone else is feeling about him. So when I say every scene every scene that involves Leon is working toward that one goal, that's how. It's either letting us know how others feel about Leon, or it's informing us about what Leon's dealing with internally. So that's why we see a lot of Leon in these one-on-one scenes with each of the major characters. Not even characters, but each of the major parties that I think are going to be at play throughout the rest of this season. The Africa scenes that we see, I think for maybe probably about the first 20 minutes, I think. They're meant to inform us of, obviously, Leon's personal thoughts as well as Wanda's. We're meant to understand that Wanda is deeply opposed to going home for good cause, with good cause. So inevitably, when something happens that wouldn't have happened otherwise, we'll remember her opposition from this episode. But yeah, I do want to say that this episode, before I continue, the fact that this episode does revolve around this one goal of kind of reintegrating Leon into the plot, this episode does kind of suffer. I feel like very, very, very little happened in this episode, and it really just was kind of like, okay, we've set the pieces in play, right? We know what Teddy and Gustavo are dealing with as a pair, and even how those things are, how their storylines are crossing with others. Obviously, Franklin has interest in Teddy, and then the DEA stuff, all that, but we know where they're positioned. We know where Franklin is positioned. We know where Jerome and Louis are positioned. We know where Big D is positioned. And now this episode was like, okay, now we're gonna bring back in Leon, who I think there is probably gonna be used to great effect this year. Now we're going to bring back Leon. We're going to reintegrate him as well. And now I think that what we're meant to understand is essentially the end of this episode was kind of a cliffhanger, because it's essentially, now that we know where Leon stands with everyone else, we now know what the consequences could be if he does decide to choose a side. That's what Franklin says to him at the end. He's like, if you are going to stay, you either have to pick a side, otherwise take Wanda, who Leon marries in this episode. Congrats to him, dressed like the King of Zamunda. Either take your wife or get the fuck out of here. Or take your wife and get the fuck out of here. And that's why we had the previous scenes with like Leon and with Big D, with Leon and with Jerome and Louie. We need to know the stakes of whatever he decides based off of what Franklin just told him. If he decides to stay and join up with Franklin, which I think is probably the most likely thing that he's going to do, that's going to put him in even greater opposition to Jerome and Louie, who weren't very kind to him when he dropped off his little wedding gift. And Jerome, I love how Amin Joseph in these scenes with Jerome, and this is now like, I don't know how many, but this is not the first time he's done this. He's had like a really great monologue where you're just like, man, he's acted his ass off, great work. But then he slides in like a Jerome kind of line that just makes you laugh. And like when he's going in on Leon, and he's like, you heard what he said. When he's just laying into Leon about everything he's done, and you're just like, man, Amin Joseph, he's really crushing the scene. And then he's like, and then he tells Leon, get the fuck out. And he's like, take that dumb shit with you, the fucking mask or whatever. Like that was, I love what he's doing with Jerome this year. I really, really do. Let's see. Oh yeah, like I said, putting him being Leon into direct opposition, even more so with Jerome and Louie, which, again, we don't have that scene. We might not know if he ends up deciding to go with Franklin. We might not know the extent to which he's truly going to be fucked, because we might not know how Jerome and Louie going to react. Now we know how Jerome and Louie is going to react if he sides up with Franklin. I mean, we would know loosely, but now we really fucking know. But before we get to Leon's full integration home, because I'm still kind of explaining the relevance of the scenes he had with all these people. Before we get to that fully, once he does get home, Einstein fills him in on everything he's missed. And then he also kind of fills us in, the viewer, on what's happened since the diner scene that took place at the end of episode 2. And I feel like Einstein's explanation of everything that happened got a little bit hard to follow, but the gist of it is that everyone's mad at everyone else, right? The only thing I can't really put together is that Einstein talks about Kane killing, I think it was Big D's cousin. It's the one that's like somebody gets shot in the head at a barbershop. And I can't figure out what beef Kane would have with Big D. Like, that's the only thing I can't piece together. Like, why would those two be going at it? Also, there's one really quick scene that I think the show should have made a little bit longer, but it seems to be like a groundbreaking for a real estate property. And I don't see how Franklin could have been able to still do any sort of real estate deals, since he only stole from Jerome and Louie the one time. And this is connecting to what I just said with not understanding why Kane is after Big D, because one of the other things that I didn't quite get is, it's because of these undefined relationships that kind of come out of this story that Einstein tells. How would Franklin have been able to buy real estate if the initial sale of Jerome's drugs to Big D got, obviously what happened with Dallas and Black Diamond at the end of that? They took that money from that deal that Franklin would have got, and Jerome killed Black Diamond. Now, I'm assuming, again, from this scene with Einstein also says that Franklin and Big D hate each other. Now, that I could put together. It makes sense that, okay, Franklin maybe hate him because he's the one told Jerome about where the swap was going to be at. So he essentially put Dallas and Black Diamond in Jerome's crosshairs and facilitated Black Diamond's death. So I could be like, okay, that makes sense that Franklin would not see eye to eye with Big D. But that's who he was selling his drugs to. So if he's not seeing eye to eye with Big D, and the first sale that he didn't work out, where the fuck did he get more money? Like, so that's the only thing I told you was all going to come back around to the fucking Einstein scene. But like, that's why I don't, when I said it got kind of tough to follow, that's what I mean. Like, I can't piece together why Kane would go after Big D, and then I can't piece together, because of information I got in that scene, how Franklin would have been able to buy real estate. Because if it weren't for that scene and I didn't know that Franklin and Big D were beefed out, I would have assumed that they just had they just continued to have a working relationship, and that allowed Franklin to gain money and then end up buying property. Like that's the way I looked at it. Then again, maybe he used the $3 million that he got, and that was enough to buy whatever it is that he had the groundbreaking for. Maybe I'm overcomplicating shit. So who knows? But I don't know. I feel like he wouldn't just put all his eggs in one basket, right? Let's see. Speaking of throwaway scenes, I had a lot of my notes were about like tying back the the Einstein story into the Franklin and Big D thing. But speaking of throwaway scenes, there's another one where Veronique's mom and her are at like lunch, and Franklin shows up and he says something like, "Are we good?" And then the mom says, "Tomorrow at lunch, he'll be out of the office and his files will be in our hands." Now, I'm gonna assume that's gonna play out in the next episode, maybe, because I don't think anything came from that. I'm assuming they're talking about Teddy, since that's the person they're going after. But I don't know. I think that was interesting that they just kind of laid that out there and nothing really came out of it. I just had a thought. Do you think? Okay, I'm sorry to pause because it's like forming in my head right now. So she said, assuming she's talking about Teddy. She said he'll be out of his office, and his files will be in our hands. Did she possibly facilitate the hijacking of Avi's gun shipment? That's what I was just about to talk about. That part of the Teddy and Gustavo story that happens in this episode. Do you think maybe she facilitated that to get him out of there? Like, how would she have known that he would be out of his office and he went to Costa Rica? Like, how would she know that unless she had some sort of involvement in it? Unless she's not talking about Teddy, she's talking about somebody else. But I don't know. Now I'm like, I don't know. I'm wondering, did I miss something? Did I watch the episode twice? Like, I'm like, shit, did I miss something? I don't know, but could that be it? Because what I was going to close out with was talking about the Teddy and Gustavo thing, right? And I liked the angle of everyone coming for Teddy while Gustavo has to like navigate being an informant, making sure Teddy doesn't catch him. Like, that's compelling to me, right? But that whole thing with the hijacked gun shipment of Avi's, like, that didn't interest me at all. I'm like, what was the point of this? And I'm like, I didn't enjoy leaving like the informant stuff that's interesting for this hijacking this gun shipment. And then, well, they don't actually entirely leave that. They mostly leave it, but we do see in the episode that the DEA crew that Gustavo is working with, they're taking photos of a deal that a swap he's doing with Louis. So now they got essentially Louis on film participating in a drug deal. And then we also see Ruben taking pictures of Gustavo meeting with the DEA guys that he's informing for. So we got one scene for that. Well, technically two scenes for that, but that's pretty much it. But anyway, the shipment gets hijacked and Teddy kills everyone despite being told to keep one person alive. And he's going through this stuff, right, that I'm assuming was on the people who were doing this hijacking. And he finds this screw, right? And like, he's examining the screw, and I sit up in my seat. I'm like leaning forward. I feel like Gustavo leaned forward. I leaned forward. I'm like, yo, what the fuck is gonna happen right now? I'm like, is there gonna be a transmitter in there or something? And he opens it up, and you know, like the dread is building. I'm like, oh shit, what's gonna be in there? And he pulls out this little piece of paper. I'm like, what the fuck is it? And he's just like, it's some words in Russian. I'm like, what the fuck was that? I'm like, what a fucking letdown. From that massive buildup, I'm thinking like, yo, what the fuck's gonna be in here? That shit left me with like narrative blue balls. Like, I was about to come and it was like, no, this is a piece of paper. I'm like, like, what the fuck was that, man? Like, and it's like, I understand the gravity of the Russians inserting themselves into this situation. Like, I understand the gravity of that. It's just like, I feel like it was delivered in such a bad fashion, because I felt like it was built up into something that was gonna be really interesting, and then you gave us like interesting information, but like I think the delivery of the information didn't match the build up to it. So like I feel like that's important information that I could have just gotten like say if Teddy got a phone call, right? And it doesn't have to end the episode, but like let's say Teddy gets a phone call and he looks distraught. And then he hangs up, pissed off. Gustavo's like, "What happened?" And he says, whatever about the Russians or whatever. I can be like, okay, now I know that the Russians are trying to insert themselves into this situation. Cool, I understand the stakes. I'd have had that information. That'd be cool. But like the way they built up with that goddamn screw, man, bolt or whatever it was, man. I was like, this is about to be incredible. I think he's going to pull out a transmitter and they'll be like, oh shit, somebody's onto us. He's like, he's going to pull out a transmitter. All of a sudden, bullets are going to come flying through. I'm like, oh man, he pulled out that fucking paper, man. Narrative goddamn blue balls, man. But yeah, that's what I was going to close with, was talking about that Teddy Gustavo thing. But now I am curious if there's any way that the mom could have been involved in that in some way, because I don't feel like it's out of her scope, because clearly Veronique thinks it's in her scope. Like, hey, I need you to help me steal $73 million from the government. She's like, all right, cool. I take 10%. Like, what? Like, how is she, like I said last week, like she's like fucking Olivia fucking Pope now, and like she can just do any fucking thing. But anyway, they've established that. So now they've established her as being somebody who can pull off these fucking high-level heists and that involve the government. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that she could have somehow been involved in this. And we know she's been international, because they talked about that too. So she might have international connects. I don't know. I wonder if I discovered something just unintentionally while I was talking that I hadn't thought of, because I'm just like, what the fuck is the point of this scene? Maybe we'll find out next week. Oh, I don't know, but maybe we'll find out next week. So until then, for episode 4, peace.